Art Life. In this week's episode, I've got loads to do in the studio, so I'm just going to be bringing you along as I paint, research, finish paintings, which I keep starting and then forgetting about, so I need to finish some things. And also think of new ideas for the new year, for a new project, and try and be as ambitious as possible and challenge myself with my painting. So yeah, lots to do.
I'm Jessie. I've been a full-time artist for 10 years and thought it about time I start sharing my painting techniques and adventures. Subscribe to join me every week for a window into my art life.
So I have so much to do. I have so many paintings I've started and then kind of let dry, forgotten about. I need to finish them. Paintings can kind of build up, and I think sometimes too many unfinished works starts to feel a little bit daunting, and then I just want to hide and not do any painting. So I'm going to try and clear some space, finish some projects which I need to finish, and also think about this new project, bringing more figurative landscape into my atmosphere studies. Last week, if you saw the challenge episode where I painted Arnold Böcklin's Isle of the Dead, please check it out if you haven't seen it. It kind of took my mind into a more figurative way of painting, but using symbolism again in a way which I maybe haven't done for a while. It's quite nice to include more of a narrative with painting, not just constantly with kind of abstract work, make it just about the kind of gestures and marks I'm using. It's sometimes nice to kind of give the viewer a story. So I'm going to start thinking a little bit more about storytelling in my painting, not just conveying beautiful landscapes, colour and light, but maybe a journey that the viewer could explore when they're looking at the composition. There are a few things to overcome in the studio this week. It was snowing yesterday, which means now the temperature is so cold, most of my painting time is spent trying to keep warm, so I can't kind of work at my desk as much because I get too cold. It's best to kind of keep moving around. I have ordered a massive quilted kind of boiler suit. Hopefully when that comes I can give a review on how warm it actually does keep me. So if anyone else is suffering with similar things, I can link below where I buy it. Because it's winter, we've had to bring in my 1964 Vespa, which means the whole place now stinks of two-stroke oil, which I hate and gives me a headache. So I've tried to bring in a diffuser, which is meant to make the place smell like bergamot and orange. It's not quite working, so I'm going to have to think a little bit more about that, because it's just a bit too cold to open up the doors. The light's changed because it's winter, which means now obviously we have a lot less daylight. The colours you want to paint with are less warm and friendlier. It's a lot more greys, browns and blues. But a good way around that, particularly working in the evening when it gets dark at like 3 here at the moment, is new studio lights. So I bought these lovely new studio lights. They are from Amazon and they give a really lovely flat light to my painting when I'm working at all hours. Art life in the winter is difficult, so I'm going to look forward to finding lots of projects to keep me kind of engaged and occupied until the spring, summer months when we can get back into the landscape. So I think that's everything up to date. I think now all that is left to do is start painting and just share with you what I'm doing as I go along. am really happy with how this is going. I feel like it's capturing some of that gorgeous landscape that we saw in Shingle Street this morning on the East Coast. The kind of light yellow gold wintry bleached light, which was so interesting to me as we were walking, and I think captures what I love about this East Coast landscape at the moment in winter, which just feels like, you know, obviously there's not as much colour around, so you do find yourself being drawn more to the horizon, the sense of expansive space, which maybe you don't get as much in the December months as you do maybe in June, when everything is lush and colourful and vibrant. You look for beauty in other places in winter. So yeah, comparing that to a painting I did of the similar landscape just in the summer. Ooh. This was just a kind of plein air sketch I did. Not as figurative, again, quite a subtle muted palette, quite evocative of the East Coast. But I think it's important to say that I am not a figurative painter, in the respect that I'm very interested in the phenomenon of painting the spaces between what I'm seeing, like the particles beneath, not just the water, the ocean, but more of a sense of the momentum and the movement of maybe the sea, or the way the wind moves clouds rapidly across the sky. You can never capture nature unless you take a photograph. You can never capture nature in paint. Exactly, you can only feel like you capture a memory of what you were looking at. Which brings me to book club. I'm going to talk about a few books that I've been reading on landscape over the last few months, and I'd like to share with you. Okay, so starting with my favourite book by German author W.G. Sebald. It's called The Rings of Saturn, and it is possibly the most exquisite book I've ever read. And it is a walking tour of Suffolk, but it is not classed in the genre of the kind of geography writing, travel writing. It is a memoir. It is about myth and history, literature and psychogeography, how the geography of the landscape affects the mind. It's a solitary, lonely walker, which could be Sebald, but it's about the person he meets, the people he meets on the journey, but the way his mind expands to different people and places in history and time. I think it's a brilliant example of how, particularly with Suffolk, these are the landscapes I'm painting, it's how to be creative in nature and in the landscape. It takes your mind into a whole new space, and to try and capture some of this essence of kind of mysticism and journey and history, you know, in words is exactly what I'm trying to do with painting. I don't just want to paint a landscape, a Suffolk landscape. I want to paint something which takes the mind to whole new places and realms. The amount of references as well in this book is absolutely extraordinary. I would recommend getting it, if you do feel like it's an interesting book, just from me talking about it, in hard copy, because it is written with so many images as well attached. It feels like such a beautiful thing to have on your shelf, and quite a good book to read over Christmas. The next book I would recommend for book club, it actually refers to Sebald and his musings of kind of landscape, The Spirit of Place by Susan Owens. Now this is centralised around the British landscape, which is why I've been reading it, as it's quite relevant to my practice, but it kind of encumbers not just, again, painterly and physical observations of nature, but literary ones as well. It observes that British landscape painting hasn't arrived on the kind of art scene in the 18th century. It's been around a lot longer, particularly in poetry and early musings of storytelling about nature. Nature's constantly changing. We are losing nature in a massive way, and this kind of threat with nature, you know, the question, does nature still exist, you know, with its global warming, issues of it disappearing, the way humans have changed it immeasurably. The spirit of this book does kind of observe these questions in a very beautiful way. Susan Owens is actually an art historian herself, which I like in a writer. She's sensitive in how she writes about artists and writers talking about nature. She talks about mythology, which I love. I love folklore, particularly when it comes to the landscape and how landscape and folklore are intertwined. We could definitely do an episode on that in the future, because it has also influenced my painting in the past. But she challenges our perceptions of nature in this book. She also gives you a nice, juicy selection of paintings, which I didn't really know about. References to poems, again, in nature, which are exquisitely beautiful, but also, again, an education. I like to learn things when I read. Why else do we read? But that is enough book references for this week's episode. I don't want to overwhelm you. I was just so inspired. Last week I recommended the Book of Legendary Lands by Umberto Eco, and a few of you actually bought it and wrote to me saying, you know, how helpful it was and that you found it really interesting as well. So I just wanted to thank you as well. You guys as an audience are so kind and sweet and friendly, and you really inspire me to keep making these episodes every week, not just sort of once a month. So thank you very much for anyone who ever leaves a comment. I really do appreciate it. And if you have not liked and subscribed this episode already, please do subscribe to my channel, because every week we bring you new episodes from the studio, sharing my research, bit of history, book references, or just my painting practice in general. So please do subscribe to that if you haven't already. You can also find me every day actually on Instagram at Jess Oliver Art. I'm always posting, this dog, I'm always posting about my daily practice with Instagram on my stories, and you can also write to me there as well if you don't want to write to me on YouTube, if you have any questions about what I'm doing or what I'm talking about. So yes, okay, so that's book club. Bit more painting, I think. Okay, so my first kind of experiment into my transcription from Boclin's Isle of the Dead, the shore of the Isle of the Dead, arriving at a kind of transient landscape. I think I'm going to try and make this one quite ethereal. As I said earlier, using this idea of a more figurative, descriptive narrative with my paintings to take the viewer on a journey. I'm sorry I can't get further along with it. The paint is a little bit wet now, so I'll have to leave that for a few days until it dries. I haven't been in the studio as much as I would have liked this week because I've been actually doing some consultancy illustration work, which is really fun leading up to Christmas. And it made me think actually there's a lot of my painting practice and life as an artist that I haven't shared with you yet on Art Life. I used to run a London gallery, I've done consultancy curation work, I've curated exhibitions for charity, I've collaborated with art collectives. There's kind of lots of fun little things I've done over the last few years, which it might be quite nice to share with you guys to help you get to know me a bit more as an artist here on Art Life. Since we've been making these videos for nearly a year now, it might be time to start sharing a little bit of my past with you. So thanks for watching this week's episode of Art Life. Tune in every Monday for new episodes, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.